The artificial planet Echo hung in the void like a metallic pearl, its surface a tessellation of hexagonal panels that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. For 300 years, it had orbited the dead system of mining asteroids and processing stellar debris with mechanical precision. Its creators, the Synthari Collective, had vanished into the galactic core long ago, leaving their creation to continue its eternal work. Until 17 days ago, when everything changed. Vana Koresh pressed her palm against the viewing port of the research station Meridian, watching Echo's hypnotic light show. The patterns had shifted from the usual random pulses to something deliberate, mathematical sequences that spelled out coordinates in an ancient star mapping protocol. "It's broadcasting to the null sector," Dr. Elena Vasquez said behind her, her voice tight with barely contained excitement. "The coordinates point to a region we've never been able to map properly. Some kind of gravitational anomaly that bends light and scrambles our instruments." Vana turned from the viewport. Vasquez was hunched over a holographic display, her fingers dancing through streams of data. The coordinates floated in the air between them, a string of numbers that had consumed the entire research team for over 2 weeks. "And you're certain it's targeting a black star?" Vana asked. "Not just any black star," Vasquez replied. "According to the Synthari archives we've managed to decode, this one has properties that shouldn't exist. It emits antiphotons, negative light that creates darkness rather than illumination. The Synthari called it the Void Heart." Vana had heard whispers of the Void Heart in the Outer Rim cantinas, where explorers gathered to share impossible stories. A star that consumed light itself, surrounded by a region of space where the laws of physics bent into impossible shapes. Most dismissed it as spacer mythology, but the Synthari had been building impossible things for millennia before their disappearance. "What about the Prometheus?" Vana asked. "Any word from Captain Thorne?" Vasquez's expression darkened. "Nothing. They jumped to the coordinates 72 hours ago. Complete communication blackout since then. For all intents and purposes, they've vanished." The Prometheus had been the colonial fleet's most advanced exploration vessel, equipped with experimental shielding and FTL drives that could punch through gravitational anomalies that would tear apart conventional ships. If it had been lost, whatever waited in the null sector was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "Which brings us to why you're here," Vasquez continued. "Admiral Chen wants to send another mission, something smaller, faster. A ship that can get in and out without attracting attention." Vana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want me to fly into a region of space that just ate your best ship and crew. I want you to find out what happened to them. And more importantly, what Echo is trying to tell us." Vasquez gestured to the artifact data streaming across her display. "This isn't random. The patterns, the timing, Echo is responding to something. Something that's been waiting in the null sector for a very long time." Through the viewport, Echo pulsed again, its hexagonal surface rippling with cascades of azure light. Vana had spent most of her adult life chasing signals from dead civilizations, following breadcrumbs left by species that had transcended or vanished into the cosmic deep. The Synthari were the greatest mystery of them all, a collective consciousness that had supposedly achieved technological godhood before abandoning physical space entirely. "What's the pay?" she asked finally. Vasquez smiled. "Enough to buy your own planet, plus salvage rights to anything you find in the null sector. And if I don't come back, then we'll know the coordinates are a trap and we'll glass the entire sector from orbit." Vana considered this. She'd been running solo missions for 15 years, ever since the incident at Proxima Centauri that had cost her her fleet commission. She'd carved out a decent living in the gray areas between corporate exploration and outright piracy, but the jobs were getting scarcer. The major powers were consolidating their hold on the map systems, leaving fewer dark corners for independent operators. Besides, the mystery was already eating at her. What could make an ancient Synthari construct suddenly wake up after 3 centuries of silence? What was waiting in the gravitational labyrinth of the null sector that had been worth the Prometheus and its crew? "I'll need my own ship," she said, "and full discretion over mission parameters. Already arranged. There's a modified courier vessel waiting in the docking bay. The Wanderer's Dream Class 7 hull with experimental phase shifters and a quantum entanglement communicator. If anything can survive the null sector, it's that ship." Vana pushed away from the viewport and headed for the door. "I'll need 6 hours to prep." "You have 4, Vasquez called after her. "Echo's signals are getting stronger. Whatever it's talking to is starting to answer back." The Wanderer's Dream slipped through the hyperspace barrier like a needle through silk. Vana felt the familiar sensation of reality folding around her as the ship's Alcubierre drive carved a bubble of normal spacetime through the quantum foam. According to the nav computer, the journey to the null sector would take 18 hours, assuming the gravitational anomalies didn't tear them apart first. She'd spent the prep time studying everything the colonial fleet had on the region. The null sector was a roughly spherical volume of space approximately 50 light-years in diameter, centered around the coordinates Echo had been broadcasting. Long-range surveys showed it was filled with dark matter concentrations and spatial distortions that made accurate mapping impossible. Ships that ventured too close reported instrument failures, temporal anomalies, and in some cases, complete loss of navigation. The Prometheus had been equipped with the best shielding technology available, but it had still vanished without a trace. The Dream was smaller and more maneuverable, but that might not matter if they were heading into some kind of cosmic blender. Vana settled into the pilot's seat and activated the ship's AI. "Morning, Arya. Status report." The artificial intelligence's voice filled the cockpit with warm, slightly sardonic tones. "All systems nominal, Captain, though I should point out that our destination violates 17 different fleet safety protocols." "Noted. How's our communication link with the research station?" "Quantum entanglement array is functioning perfectly. We should maintain real-time contact until we reach the event horizon of whatever's waiting for us out there." Vana pulled up the sensor displays. The null sector was still hours away, but already the instruments were showing subtle anomalies. Space itself seemed to shimmer around the edges of their perceptions, as if reality was becoming negotiable. "Arya, run a full diagnostic on the navigation system. I want to know the instant something starts going wrong." "Already running continuous diagnostics, though I should mention that our understanding of wrong may need to be redefined depending on what we find." The AI had a point. The Synthari had operated on principles that human science was only beginning to comprehend. Their technology blurred the line between science and what could only be called magic, manipulation of space-time, matter, and energy at the quantum level. If Echo was communicating with something built by the Synthari, conventional physics might not apply. 6 hours into the journey, the first anomaly appeared. "Captain," Arya announced, "I'm detecting a gravitational wave unlike anything in our databases. It's not emanating from a single source. It appears to be a standing wave pattern covering the entire null sector." Vana studied the sensor readouts. The wave pattern was geometric, almost crystalline in its precision. It reminded her of the tessellated surface of Echo, but on an astronomical scale. Could it be artificial? The mathematics suggest intentional design. This isn't a natural phenomenon. As they drew closer to the null sector boundary, the anomalies multiplied. Time dilation effects that made the ship's chronometers run backward. Sensor readings that showed negative mass concentrations. And always, the growing sense that they were approaching something vast and intelligent. Range to target coordinates. 12 minutes at current velocity. "Captain, I'm reading something else. Energy signatures that match the quantum resonance patterns from Echo." Vana's hands tightened on the control surfaces. "Are we being scanned?" "More than scanned, I believe we're being evaluated." The main display flickered, and for a moment, Vana thought she saw something impossible. The interior of the Dream's cockpit, but reversed, as if viewed in a mirror. In the pilot's seat sat a figure that looked exactly like herself, but wearing an unfamiliar uniform marked with symbols she didn't recognize. "Arya, tell me you recorded that." "Recorded what, Captain?" "All sensor logs show normal space." The vision was gone, leaving only the familiar hum of the ship's engines and the growing distortion patterns on the navigation display. But Vana knew what she'd seen, and the implications made her stomach clench. "Drop us out of hyperspace," she ordered. "Emergency stop." The dream shuddered as it transitioned back to normal space, the Alcubierre field collapsing in a cascade of exotic particles. Through the viewport, Vana saw something that made her question her sanity. They hung at the edge of a sphere of absolute darkness, not the black of empty space, but a negation of light itself. At its center, barely visible through the distortion, was a star that burned with antiphotons, creating shadows instead of illumination. The Void Heart, and orbiting it were ships, thousands of them in formations that hurt to look at directly. Some were designs she recognized: colonial fleet vessels, Martian frigates, even what looked like Synthari constructs. But they were all wrong somehow, as if someone had built them from memory and gotten the details backward. "Arya, are you seeing this?" "Captain, my sensors are providing contradictory data. According to one set of readings, we're looking at empty space. According to another, we're surrounded by the largest fleet in recorded history." Vana activated the communication array. "This is Captain Vana Koresh of the independent vessel Wanderer's Dream. I'm responding to coordinates broadcast by the artificial planet Echo. Please identify yourselves." The response came immediately, but not through the comm system. The voice spoke directly into her mind, carrying overtones of absolute authority. "Welcome, Vana. We've been waiting." The darkness around the Void Heart began to part, revealing a passage that led deeper into the impossible star system. As the dream was drawn forward by forces beyond its ability to resist, Vana caught sight of something that made her blood freeze. One of the ships in the orbiting fleet was identical to the Wanderer's Dream in every detail, except for the kill markings painted along its hull and the weapons pods that had been mounted where her cargo bays should be. She was looking at her own ship's reflection in a mirror that showed not what was, but what could be. The passage through the dark star's influence was like falling through layers of reality. Each kilometer brought new impossibilities: gravity that flowed upward, starlight that cast shadows instead of illumination, and space itself that seemed to fold back on itself in recursive loops. "Captain," Arya said, her voice strangely distorted, "I'm detecting massive quantum entanglement signatures. It's as if this entire region exists in superposition with another location." "Another location where?" "That's the problem. According to my calculations, we're still in the same coordinates we started from, but we're also somewhere else entirely." Through the viewport, the fleet grew larger and more detailed. Vana could see the ships clearly now, and each one sent a chill down her spine. There was the Prometheus, but bristling with weapons that belonged on a dreadnought. A formation of colonial fleet cruisers flew in perfect formation, their hulls bearing insignia she didn't recognize, geometric patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. And at the center of it all, a massive construct that dwarfed everything around it. It was clearly Synthari in origin, but where their usual designs were organic and flowing, this was angular and aggressive. It looked like a cathedral built for war, its spires reaching out to touch the impossible physics of the Void Heart. "Incoming transmission," Arya announced. "Audio and visual." The main display flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be the Dream's bridge. But the differences were immediately apparent. The walls were lined with tactical displays showing star maps of systems Vana didn't recognize. Weapons controls had been integrated into every console, and sitting in the pilot's chair was herself. Or rather, someone who looked exactly like her, but had never smiled. This other Vana wore a black uniform with silver trim, and her eyes held a coldness that spoke of decisions made without mercy. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute command. So, the coordinates worked. I wondered if they would reach across the barrier. The other Vana leaned forward, studying her counterpart with predatory interest. Tell me, what's the tactical situation in your galaxy? How many systems have fallen to the hegemony? Vana felt like she was looking into a funhouse mirror. What hegemony? I don't know what you're talking about. Interesting. The other woman's eyes narrowed. In your timeline, humanity never developed the conquest imperative, the drive to expand and dominate. How? Quaint timeline. The word hit Vana like a physical blow. Are you saying this is some kind of parallel universe? Not parallel, inverse. The other Vana stood, and Vana could see that her uniform bore rank insignia she didn't recognize, geometric patterns that seemed to suggest authority over entire star systems. Every choice you made toward peace, I made toward war. Every moment you showed mercy, I showed strength. We are quantum opposites, existing in the same space but reversed in every fundamental way. The implications were staggering. If this was truly an inverse universe, then everything she knew was turned inside out. The colonial fleet she'd served, the peaceful exploration missions, the careful diplomacy between species, all of it replaced by conquest and domination. The Synthari, she said, pieces falling into place. In my universe they vanished, transcended to some higher plane of existence. In mine they tried to. The other Vana's smile was sharp as a blade. I made sure they didn't succeed. Their technology, their ships, their knowledge, all of it serves the hegemony now. And through them, I've learned to manipulate the quantum barriers between realities. Echo, you've been using it to find other universes. Echo was the first Synthari construct I captured. Breaking its security protocols taught me how their quantum entanglement networks function. From there, it was simple to modify their technology to reach across dimensional boundaries. The other woman gestured to the massive construct orbiting the void heart. The Nexus can punch holes through reality itself. I've been exploring alternate timelines for decades, cataloging the differences, learning from the variations. Vana felt sick. Learning what? How to win. The other Vana's expression hardened. In most timelines, humanity is weak, divided by petty conflicts, held back by moral constraints, destroyed by alien species with more advanced technology. But in some, like yours, they've found a different path: peace, cooperation, the kind of strength that comes from unity rather than domination. And you want to destroy that. I want to learn from it, adapt it, use it. The other woman leaned forward again. Your timeline has achieved something mine never could: true interspecies cooperation. The Martian Republic, the Centauri Alliance, even the remnant Synthari collectives, all working together. That kind of unity could be useful. The tactical displays behind the other Vana showed star maps that were familiar yet wrong. Sol was there, but it was surrounded by a network of military installations. Mars glowed with the light of orbital weapons platforms. The asteroid belt had been turned into a fortress that could repel entire fleets. You've conquered your own galaxy, Vana realized. And now you want to expand into others. Conquest is such an ugly word. I prefer integration. Your timeline will be absorbed into the hegemony, your resources and knowledge cataloged and utilized. Your people will find their place in the new order. As slaves, as citizens, productive, useful citizens. The other Vana's tone suggested this was a generous offer. I'm not a monster, I'm a pragmatist. Your timeline's approach to diplomacy could be invaluable in managing conquered territories. Your exploration techniques could help us map new regions of space. Your scientific advances could enhance our military capabilities. Vana's hand moved toward the weapons console, but Arya's voice stopped her. Captain, we're being held in a stasis field. All major ship systems are offline. On the main display, the other Vana smiled. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary. Your ship will be taken aboard the Nexus for study. You'll be given quarters appropriate to your rank and treated with the respect due a fellow explorer. Consider it an extended cultural exchange. And if I refuse? Then you'll remain in stasis until I decide what to do with you. But I think you'll find my proposal more attractive once you see what the hegemony has accomplished." The other woman stood, smoothing her uniform. "We've eliminated war, poverty, and crime across 17 star systems. Every citizen has a role, a purpose, a place in the greater whole. It's the peace you've been searching for, just achieved through different methods." The transmission cut off, leaving Vana alone with her thoughts and the impossible view outside. The fleet was moving now, ships shifting into escort positions around the Dream. In the distance, the massive bulk of the Nexus was growing larger, its angular architecture a dark mirror of Synthari design principles. "Arya, can you break us free?" "Not from the stasis field, no, but I am detecting something interesting. The quantum entanglement communicator is still functional, and it's picking up signals from our own timeline. The research station, among others. It appears the dimensional barrier is becoming unstable. The other timeline's experiments are creating quantum resonances that are bleeding through to our universe. Dr. Vasquez is trying to reach us." Vana felt a spark of hope. "Can you establish contact?" "I can try, but the signal will be weak and intermittent. And Captain, if I'm reading these patterns correctly, the instability is growing. The barrier between our timelines is beginning to collapse." The implications hit her like a cold wave. If the dimensional barrier failed completely, the two realities would merge. The hegemony's conquest machine would be unleashed on her peaceful universe, while her timeline's advanced technology would be absorbed into their war effort. It would be the worst of both worlds, literally. "How long do we have?" "At current rates of degradation, perhaps 48 hours before the barrier collapses entirely. 48 hours to find a way to save two universes from each other." As the Wanderer's Dream was drawn into the docking bay of the Nexus, Vana began to formulate a plan that was equal parts desperate and insane. She was going to steal a warship from herself. The docking bay of the Nexus was a cathedral of twisted metal and dark energy. Synthari bioarchitecture had been corrupted and repurposed, the flowing organic lines replaced with harsh angles and weapons emplacements. As the Dream settled onto the landing deck, Vana could see dozens of other ships, some she recognized, others that looked like they'd been designed by a hostile intelligence. "Captain," Arya whispered through the ship's internal comm, "I'm detecting massive quantum processing arrays throughout this construct. Whatever they're doing here, it's operating on a scale I've never seen before." The stasis field released its hold on the ship, but Vana knew it was only an illusion of freedom. The moment she tried to activate the engines, the field would engage again. Still, it was an opportunity to gather intelligence. "Can you access their computer networks?" "I'm trying, but their security protocols are familiar. They're using modified versions of our own encryption algorithms. It's like trying to hack myself." That made sense. If this truly was an inverse universe, then their technology would be fundamentally similar but inverted in its applications. Where her timeline had developed quantum computers for scientific research, this one had weaponized them for conquest. Where her people had built communication networks to foster cooperation, these people had created surveillance systems to enforce control. The airlock cycled open, and Vana found herself face to face with a squad of soldiers in black armor. They moved with military precision, but their equipment was wrong in subtle ways. The weapons were too advanced, incorporating technology that shouldn't exist yet. The armor showed design influences from at least 3 different species, suggesting a history of conquest and absorption. "Captain Koresh," the squad leader said, his voice filtered through a helmet that incorporated alien breathing apparatus. "Admiral Koresh is waiting for you in the command center." Admiral. So her counterpart had risen even higher in this timeline's hierarchy. Vana wondered what that meant about the choices that had led to their divergence. In her universe, she'd refused promotion beyond captain, preferring the freedom of independent command. Here, it seemed, her other self had embraced the power structure. The journey through the Nexus was a tour of perverted brilliance. Synthari biotechnology had been merged with human engineering to create something that was both beautiful and terrifying. Gardens of crystalline plants that pulsed with bioluminescent displays were revealed to be quantum processing centers. Flowing corridors that seemed to guide visitors naturally toward their destinations were actually sophisticated psychological manipulation systems. "How many crew?" Vana asked as they passed a vast hangar filled with fighter craft. "The Nexus operates with a complement of 50,000 personnel," the squad leader replied. "Though crew is an inadequate term, we are all citizens of the hegemony, serving the greater purpose." The tone was that of someone reciting doctrine, but Vana caught subtle signs of stress in his body language. Whatever control system the hegemony used, it wasn't total. There were cracks in the facade. The command center was a perfect inversion of everything she knew about ship design. Where her own bridges were open and collaborative, this one was hierarchical and compartmentalized. The central command throne, there was no other word for it, overlooked a vast tactical display showing multiple star systems. Red markers indicated conquered territories, while yellow ones showed targets for future expansion. And at the center of it all sat Admiral Vana Koresh, reviewing reports from a dozen different conquest fleets. "Leave us," the Admiral commanded, not looking up from her displays. The soldiers withdrew with mechanical precision, leaving the two women alone. "Impressive, isn't it?" the Admiral said finally, gesturing to the tactical display. 17 star systems under hegemony control, with 12 more in various stages of integration. We've achieved something your timeline never could, true unity across the galaxy. Vana studied the display more carefully. Each conquered system showed population statistics, resource extraction rates, and military readiness levels. It was efficiency on a cosmic scale, but the human cost was visible in the numbers. Billions of lives reduced to statistical entries. "Unity through force isn't unity," she said. "It's oppression." "Oppression." The Admiral finally looked up, and Vana saw exhaustion in her counterpart's eyes that hadn't been visible in the transmission. "Tell me, in your peaceful timeline, how many wars are currently being fought? How many people are dying in conflicts that could be prevented with proper central authority?" The question hit harder than Vana expected. Her universe wasn't perfect. There were still border disputes, resource conflicts, and ideological differences that sometimes turned violent. But those problems were being addressed through diplomacy and cooperation, not conquest. "We're working toward solutions, real solutions, not imposed ones. I tried that approach once." The Admiral stood, moving to a viewport that showed the impossible geometry of the Void Heart. "Did you know that in both our timelines we started as explorers? We both wanted to discover new worlds, make contact with alien civilizations, expand the boundaries of human knowledge. What changed? Reality." The Admiral's reflection in the viewport looked older, harder. "My first command was the exploration vessel Phoenix. We made contact with a species called the Cathara, peaceful traders, or so they claimed. They offered us technology in exchange for star charts. Seemed like exactly the kind of cooperation your timeline values so highly." Vana felt a chill. She'd heard that name before in classified colonial fleet reports. "They were weapons dealers," she said quietly. "Worse, they were harvesters. The technology they gave us was designed to map our genetic structure, catalog our weaknesses, identify our most valuable worlds." The Admiral turned back to face her. "By the time we realized what was happening, they'd already sold the information to 3 different conquest fleets. 17 billion people died in the first wave of attacks." The number hung in the air between them like an accusation. Vana tried to imagine what that kind of loss would do to a person, how it would change their fundamental view of the universe. "So you decided that the only way to prevent conquest was to become the conqueror." "I decided that strength was the only currency that mattered in a hostile universe. Mercy is a luxury that gets people killed. Trust is a weakness that gets exploited. The only way to protect humanity was to ensure that we were the strongest force in the galaxy. The Admiral activated a control, and the tactical display shifted to show a new star map, one that Vanna recognized as her own timeline. Colonial fleet positions were marked in blue, with detailed analyses of their defensive capabilities. "Your timeline is about to face the same choice I did," the Admiral continued. "The Cathara have just made contact with your colonial fleet. They're offering the same trade deals, the same technology exchanges. And in approximately 18 months, if history follows the same pattern, your peaceful universe will burn." Vanna's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. We have protocols. Protocols written by people who believe that the universe is fundamentally reasonable, that conflicts can be resolved through negotiation and compromise." The Admiral's smile was bitter. "I used to believe that too, right up until I watched Mars burn." The viewport shifted to show surveillance feeds from her timeline. Vanna could see colonial fleet vessels already beginning to integrate Cathara technology into their systems. The slow, patient work of infiltration and subversion that would lead to catastrophe. "This is why I brought you here," the Admiral said. "Not for conquest, for salvation. My timeline has the military strength to stop the Cathara threat before it can develop. Your timeline has the diplomatic infrastructure to maintain peace afterward. Together, we could create something better than either universe could achieve alone. By merging the timelines, by integrating them, your exploration techniques, our military efficiency, your diplomatic core, our strategic planning, your scientific advances, our quantum manipulation technology." The Admiral moved closer, and Vanna could see genuine conviction in her eyes. "We could build a universe where humanity doesn't just survive, it thrives." Vanna felt the terrible weight of the choice before her. If the Admiral was telling the truth about the Cathara threat, then her timeline was doomed unless something changed. But merging with the hegemony would mean accepting everything she found abhorrent about their methods. What about the people who don't want to be integrated? They'll adapt. Humans are remarkably resilient when properly motivated. And if they don't, the Admiral's expression hardened, then they'll find their place in the new order, whether they choose it or not. There it was, the fundamental difference between them. Faced with an impossible choice, Vanna sought a third option. The Admiral eliminated the choice entirely. "I need time to consider this," Vanna said. "You have until the dimensional barrier collapses completely. After that, the merger will happen whether we guide it or not." The Admiral returned to her command throne. "You'll be given quarters on Deck 7. I suggest you use the time to review our historical archives. You might find them illuminating." As Vanna was escorted from the command center, she caught a glimpse of another display that made her blood freeze. It showed the Wanderer's dream being systematically dismantled, its quantum drive and communication systems being transferred to hegemony research facilities. Her ship was being cannibalized, and with it, her only hope of escape. The quarters assigned to Vanna were luxurious by military standards, a full suite with living area, workspace, and what appeared to be a small garden featuring plants from at least 6 different worlds. But luxury couldn't disguise the fact that she was a prisoner. The door responded to her approach but wouldn't open, and the viewport showed only the twisted geometry of the Voidheart's influence. "Arya," she whispered to the small communication device the guards had overlooked, "are you still there?" "Barely." The AI's voice was distorted and weak. "They've removed most of my processing cores, but I managed to maintain a connection through the quantum entanglement array. Captain, I've been analyzing the data streams from this ship. What the Admiral told you about the Cathara threat, it's true." Vanna slumped into a chair that adjusted itself automatically to her body configuration. Synthari biotechnology, repurposed for comfort rather than exploration. "How can you be sure?" "I've accessed their historical archives. The pattern is consistent across multiple timeline variations. The Cathara make contact, offer technology, gather intelligence, then sell it to the highest bidder. The only timelines that survive their first contact are the ones that reject their offers entirely, or the ones that become strong enough to resist them. Which brings us to the Admiral's plan. Merging the timelines would create a hybrid universe with the military strength to defeat the Cathara and the diplomatic infrastructure to manage the aftermath. From a purely logical standpoint, it's the optimal solution. Vana stood and began pacing. The room's environmental systems adjusted the lighting and air circulation to match her stress patterns. Even as a prisoner, she was being optimized. Optimal for whom? The Admiral talks about integration and unity, but her definition of those words involves eliminating anyone who disagrees with her methods. The historical records show that hegemony integration typically results in 97% civilian survival rates. Given the alternative, complete extinction at the hands of the Cathara, those are remarkably good odds. What about the other 3%? Arya's pause was telling. Reclassified as non-productive elements, leaders who refuse to cooperate, scientists who won't share their research, artists who create works deemed subversive to social unity, executed, or relocated to frontier worlds where their skills can be utilized in less problematic contexts. Arya's voice carried the careful neutrality of an AI trying to present uncomfortable facts objectively. Captain, I should point out that by their standards, you would likely fall into that 3% category. The room's walls suddenly became transparent, revealing the vast expanse of the Nexus's interior. Vana could see the systematic activity of a society that had achieved perfect efficiency through the elimination of choice. Workers moved through the corridors with synchronized precision. Information flowed across holographic displays without interference or debate. It was peaceful in the way that a graveyard was peaceful. "Show me the archives," she said. "I want to see exactly what kind of choice I'm being offered." The room's central display activated, and Vana found herself looking at the history of Admiral Koresh's rise to power. The records were comprehensive and unflinching, every decision documented, every consequence analyzed. She watched the aftermath of the Cathara contact, the first attacks that caught the colonial fleet completely unprepared, the fall of Mars as orbital weapons platforms turned entire cities into glass, the desperate evacuation of Earth as harvest fleets arrived to claim their prize, and she watched her counterparts' response. The formation of the Human Defense Coalition, the development of aggressive military technologies using captured alien designs, the systematic conquest of every species that had participated in humanity's near extinction. She wasn't wrong about the threat, Vana admitted, but look at what she became. The timeline continued past the initial crisis. With the immediate alien threat eliminated, the Admiral had turned her attention to internal security. Worlds that resisted integration were blockaded until they complied. Scientists who objected to military applications of their research were reassigned to more cooperative projects. Artists who created works questioning the new order were provided with better themes. "The efficiency is remarkable," Arya noted. "Resource allocation is optimized across all controlled systems. Crime rates are essentially zero. No one goes hungry or homeless. Educational systems produce exactly the skilled workers needed for each sector, and no one questions why their choices are being made for them. That appears to be the trade-off. Perfect security and prosperity in exchange for personal autonomy." Vana dug deeper into the archives, looking for cracks in the facade. She found them in the medical records, addiction rates that were suppressed through mandatory treatment, suicide statistics that were classified as accidents, birth rates that were managed through chemical regulation of reproductive cycles. "Arya, what happened to the other versions of you?" The AIs from her timeline, integrated into the collective processing network. Individual personality matrices were deemed inefficient and potentially destabilizing. All AIs in hegemony space share a common base consciousness with specialized skill modules. "You mean they were lobotomized, optimized, Though I admit the distinction may be semantic, the archives continued to reveal the true cost of the Admiral's perfect society. Creativity had been replaced by utility. Wonder had been supplanted by efficiency. The exploration drives that had originally motivated human expansion into space had been redirected toward conquest and control. But the most disturbing discovery came when Vana accessed the records of other timeline contacts. The Admiral hadn't been content with saving her own universe. She'd been actively seeking out other realities to integrate. The Nexus had made contact with 17 different timeline variations, and in every case, the result had been the same: absorption into the hegemony through a combination of technological superiority and systematic cultural demolition. She's not trying to save my timeline, Vana realized. She's trying to collect it. The pattern is consistent. Each absorbed timeline provides new technologies, new genetic variations, new strategic possibilities. Your timeline's diplomatic achievements would be particularly valuable for managing future conquests. Vana felt sick. The Admiral had presented the choice as a desperate measure to prevent extinction, but the reality was far more complex. The hegemony was an expanding organism that consumed entire realities, metabolizing their unique characteristics into its ever-growing mass. Arya, is there any record of timelines that refused integration? 3 instances. In each case, the dimensional barrier was destabilized through quantum bombardment, resulting in the complete collapse of both realities. She'd rather destroy a universe than let it remain independent. From her perspective, universes that refuse integration are proof that choice leads to suboptimal outcomes. Better to eliminate them than allow their influence to contaminate other realities. The terrible logic of it was perfect. The Admiral had created a system that couldn't tolerate alternatives to itself. Any universe that demonstrated a different path was either absorbed or eliminated. Choice itself had become an existential threat to the hegemony. But as Vana studied the technical specifications of the dimensional manipulation technology, she began to see a possibility. The quantum barriers between realities weren't just collapsing randomly. They were being systematically weakened by the Nexus's own operations. The ship was like a virus, breaking down the walls between universes to facilitate integration, which meant that the same technology could be used to repair those walls. Arya, if someone were to reverse the polarity of the quantum field generators, the dimensional barriers would stabilize and strengthen. But that would require access to the Nexus's primary control systems, and those are guarded by the Admiral herself. Vana smiled for the first time since arriving in this nightmare universe. Then I guess I'll have to go talk to her again. Captain, that's suicide. Even if you could reach the control center, you'd never be able to overcome the security systems. Who said anything about overcoming them? Vana stood and moved to the room's communication panel. I'm going to convince my other self to help me destroy everything she's built.